to Connected Conversations for Creatives, a place where creatives like you can learn, grow, and connect. I'm your host, Jennifer Carr. Today, we are diving into the world of creativity from many different angles. Creativity isn't just about solitary genius. It's often about synergy, about minds coming together to create something greater than the sum of its parts. So just think about it. Every great song, film, or piece of literature that you love likely had multiple minds behind it, weaving their ideas into a cohesive whole. Collaboration isn't always easy, though. It requires communication, compromise, and sometimes even conflict. But when it works, it's magical, like a symphony of ideas coming together to create a masterpiece. And let's not forget one of the most precious resources for any creative: time. Time management can make or break your projects, determining whether they flourish or flounder in the sea of endless possibilities. So, how do you balance creativity with productivity? How do you carve out space for inspiration amidst the demands of everyday life? And how do you navigate expectations of time when it relates to collaboration? Joining us today is Deborah Notis, a creative powerhouse who, alongside her son, has co-written and self-published 2 delightful children's books. With her background in publishing and educational consulting, she brings a wealth of knowledge and insights to our conversation. So, Deborah, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Jen. I'm really excited to be here and discuss this.
Yeah, me too. And so, just for the listeners' sake, I will just say that we were introduced through a mutual acquaintance we have, Alyssa Hecker, who was a guest last season, which excites me to no end because that's why I started this show in the first place, to connect resources and people and just kind of build this community that encourages collaboration and networking. But we're here to talk about you and your amazing journey into not only writing books, but you wrote books with your son, which had to be an experience in and of itself. And so you just have so much relative experience that I think authors listening are going to get some great tidbits from if they stick around.
So I'm going to start out by saying I love Hecker. I call her Hecker. And she's the best. She's awesome. She's a great connector and very creative herself. So, her referring me to you means a lot in my book. Let's start with
yes.
But yeah, we were sitting around during the pandemic and my kids were playing video games. I have 4 boys. Now they're 25, 23, 19, and 17. But they were 4 years younger then. And my then 14-year-old was sitting around and I was complaining to them that they were not doing anything productive. So I had them help me clean out a bunch of papers. After my father had passed away, my mother had kept a bunch of things that he kept and handed them to me. Amongst those things was an essay that I wrote when I was in 3rd grade with him. Okay, and it was called Shipwrecked on Fudgesicle Island. It was simplistic and silly, and it's actually on our website, raderreads.com, the original version of it. Very simplistic. And I read it to my kids who were just perfectly annoyed with me. Okay. And my youngest, who's a sharp little cookie, not so little anymore, but was a sharp little cookie at the time, looked at me and goes, "That just is terrible. I could do so much better than that." So I looked at him and I said, "Go for it.
Prove it."
I said, "Now you have to. There's no other choice." And he sat down and he came up with this idea. Here's the book, Shipwrecked on Fudge Pop Island, which I'll explain later also. But it involves, while the original story involved one little girl getting stuck on an island, he made it all about him and his brothers. So the characters are named after his brothers. Their middle names are his brothers' names and his name. And, it's a story about friendship and bonding and including other people and being open to new ideas and new adventures, and that there's a place for everyone. So he actually did a really nice job. It's a rhyming story, so it has a great beat. I tweaked it. I went through it with him afterwards. Obviously, he was 14 years old. There needed to be some work done. But it was really fun to do together. And that was what made it so great. A lot of screaming. You have a 14-year-old who knows way more than you. And we had to learn to cooperate. But we learned to cooperate so much so that we ended up writing a second book, Only Pizza.
That's fantastic.
We did this based on so the second book was based on us making fun of his second brother, who for about 20 years ate only pizza. And we made the story a lot nicer than what he was thinking originally.
Of course.
Made it more about accepting others and their differences and making sure that there's a place for everyone at the table, that everyone feels comfortable. But, that's where we left off with both books. I'll tell you that he had a really strong concept of what he wanted in terms of the way the characters looked and appeared, and to make them also inclusive so that everyone felt like as they were looking at the book, they could see themselves.
Nice.
So that was great also. And then, we went from there.
That's fantastic. Now it's really ironic that we are having this conversation today because my daughter is 14 and she is, she's very, very creative. She's very artistic and she does animations and she does drawings and stuff like that. And it boggles my mind because I'm not sure where it came from. Like, her dad can draw, but it's like on the engineer level of drawing straight lines, or look at something and copy it. But her head just produces images and they turn up in some kind of project. And so this morning, I was talking about how I wish that for one of my books that I had like a video version of a review that somebody had left on Goodreads for me. And in the review, they had likened my book to a Taylor Swift song. And I was like, how fun would that be if like there was a video that kind of showed this? And she was like, oh, I'll make you one. And I was like, okay, just whenever you have time. Because sometimes she has these ideas and she wants to go her own way and it's never from anybody else's idea. And so she said, do you want it to? And she gave me all these things and I told her exactly what I wanted. And she goes, well, I could do this. And I said, I'm just going to tell you, this is what I want. And this is what I think would be best for me to share. And she's like, okay. And normally she says, how much are you going to pay me? And this time she didn't. Normally there's a fee involved. This time she was like, I just want to do it. And I said, okay. And I was expecting like next week she might remember to do it or whatever. And then an hour later she sends me this video and it was so cute and so well done. But there's always this push and pull when it comes to working with her because she has her own vision and I have my own vision and they aren't always on the same page. So what was like one of y'all's biggest struggles when it came to that? Because I know that a 14-year-old and an adult mom, we don't see life the same way. So
I think, part of it was that to begin with, he was basically diminishing what I had done when I was 8.
yeah.
I was 8. I wrote a little composition with my dad. So that started out to be a little antagonistic and sort of, let's butt heads here. He's a very sweet but strong personality. So when he sat down and wrote himself, and then when I came in and said, no, let's take it this way and twist it around and let's, make it rhyme. And, because he had started rhyming, but then he got tired of rhyming initially. I said, no, if you're starting to rhyme, the whole thing has to rhyme. When they're 14, they don't get that. So it was the evolution of the process that was really a cooperative process. He had the idea of they're in the class and they walk away from the class, and that, the story is about these 4 boys who walk away during a class trip. Mm-hmm. He had that idea. And then what I loved in terms of his ideas was he was the one at the end who said, let's make everybody really happy that they came back with treats. So this is a 14-year-old saying this, and you have to make it happen, right? We twisted the story around a little bit more, and it came out to be this very happy ending of these 4 boys who wander off from a class trip. And that normally a teacher would want to wring their neck, right?
Oh yeah.
And you got to wonder if the teacher was a little oblivious because Did he even notice that the kids were gone? So the other interesting thing is that the teacher in the story is modeled after my father.
Oh.
It's Mr. Stanley, and actually his picture is based on a picture of my father. May he rest in.
Oh, how precious, though.
So it was, and the book is dedicated to my dad, who helped us, who helped me write that initial story.
Yeah.
But it was funny. It was just it's a lighthearted togetherness adventure type of thing, but getting there together was a little more bumpy than the story turned out.
How long did it take y'all to kind of flesh it out and work through all of that?
We spent about 2 months writing, which was good. Everybody was locked inside. It was the middle of the pandemic.
Yeah. What else are you gonna do?
They were playing a lot of video games. So
some of us were building chicken coops, some of us were playing video games. We all had to do something with our time.
Fighting, 4 boys in a house.
Oh my gosh.
Literally I'll tell you another funny story, which is a little off topic, but you'll find it funny. Our middle school wanted the kids to complete their gym classes remotely. Now, remote gym for an 8th grader, a 14-year-old, is probably the silliest concept you'll ever hear. Okay.
Yeah.
And I actually wrote a spoof that's on my personal blog called The Purge Chick, which isn't really up to date, but I put things on as I write them, about a letter to my son's 8th grade gym teacher and how he was spending a lot of time doing physical activity because he's being beaten up. He's throwing clothes on the floor. They're throwing food at each other. So it was.
Oh, listen, we adapted to everything we possibly could during that time. My kid she did baton lessons, and they did those virtually. You want to talk about how you're going to do baton lessons virtually? You're going to carry your camera outside, or you're going to twirl a baton inside, and it was just kind of it was not a good situation, but we managed. Everybody managed. But yeah, I can imagine, let's release our creativity instead.
Who can throw which kid across the room faster? Go!
Oh, that's so funny. Oh, yeah, no, I can't imagine. And we just have the one, and she is very docile, and she is perfectly content to read a book or draw all day long, so we have to force her out sometimes. So yeah, I can imagine that having to adapt in that situation would definitely take some convincing. But I'm just wondering, did he fall in love with writing at that point, or did he already like to write? Does he still write? Because you wrote a second book.
So we wrote a second book. The second book, my second child went abroad in, I guess it was 2022, as the pandemic was waning. Okay. So he went abroad to Scotland, and we met him there at the end of his time abroad to bring him back. We were picking him up from his playdate, the 20-year-old or 21-year-old. And we were out for dinner one night, and this child who literally ate pizza and scoped out pizza places in St. Andrews before he left to make sure that he had something to eat every day, okay, was eating fish and chips. Okay. And braised beef and hamburgers and Indian food. He was eating chicken tikka masala. And we were just blown away. And my 4th one, who is a very adventurous eater, my co-author, Jonathan, who's a very adventurous eater, was so annoyed because he always wants to go to new food places, and he picks out these really wacky places to try, and everybody has to find something that they'll eat, but he's all excited about eating it. And we were always restricted by this second child who only ate pizza, French fries, red grapes, never green, and bananas. Oh, and egg. We got him to eat eggs at one point. Okay, so that was basically his whole diet. So when he found out that he was eating more, he started making fun of him. And I said, well, write that down. And that's how we ended up with that.
That's so
Second book.
funny.
Also rhyming, also the same characters, but a story based around somebody who would only eat pizza.
Yeah. No, I love that. So y'all got inspired to write a second book. Does he write outside of y'all's books
He
when you
does.
write? Yeah.
He writes. Well, he wrote for a local newspaper,
Nice.
and he wrote for his school sports magazine for a while.
Okay. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yes, he's a good writer. I don't know if it's his passion, but he enjoys it enough to have applied to college as a dual major in English.
I would say he might like it just a little bit. He's going to do a lot of writing. That's fantastic. Okay, so you wrote your books and you decided that you wanted to publish these books. So I'm not familiar with children's books and how all of that works. I have a friend who writes and illustrates children's books, but I don't really know her process when it comes to, who did the illustrations? How did you work that out? Are y'all artists as well?
We are not. Well, it's funny because I said to my second one, he's somewhat artistic. He can really come up with something. He used to sit there and draw things that he saw on the internet, like characters and whatever. I said to him, take a stab at it. And he goes, I'm not that kind of artist.
Yeah.
So we actually found our first artist who was extremely talented, Jennifer Carr, on Instagram. She had done sort of a picturesque thing of Alice in Wonderland, which is my favorite story growing up. Okay. And I said, oh, that's what I want the book to look like. And he said, well, I know what I want the characters to look like, and you have an idea about the whole story. So let's see if she'll work with us. And she worked with us. She was fabulous. She was from the UK. And she just came up with this whole, really colorful, lively. I'll show you. I think this is one of my favorite pages.
Oh, yeah.
She's quite an artist. So she came up with this concept, and we ran with that. She was great to work with. It was all online. I never had a conversation with her. But we really connected in terms of our ideas and the concepts. And really, my son took on the characters. He knew what he wanted them to look like. He knew what outfits he wanted them to be wearing. He knew what colors he wanted them, to have them be represented in terms of clothing. And he wanted to make sure, as I said, that everyone felt seen in the story, which was great also. Mm-hmm. I had an idea of what I wanted the fudgesicles to look like, the fudge pops. So we were originally going to call the book, as we had called the story, Shipwrecked on Fudgesicle Island. But apparently fudgesicle is a trademarked word.
It is a brand. Yeah, I didn't think about that.
And so we changed it to Fudge Pop.
Gotcha. Nice.
But I had that concept, and then she really brought it to life.
That's cool. Okay, so she does all the illustrations. How long does that process take, especially if you're going back and forth online?
So it took about 3 months.
Okay.
To get that done.
That's good. I'm always wary about collaborating with artists. I know that sounds terrible, that I just thought, because I have had good experiences. For instance, the woman who did my book covers for my first 2 books, she was actually a guest on the show, and that's what she does, is cover designs, illustrations, that kind of thing. And so, and I loved working with her, but I got to know her. I kind of, I had a feel for her. I've had other people, actually just recently last week, I paid for a book trailer based on work that I had seen them do, and they provided me with a book trailer, and even the second version, I was like, thanks for this, like it was kind of like, and so I'm always just so wary of collaborating with people that I don't have a personal connection with, which is funny, because sometimes you collaborate with people that you do know, and you're like, oh, I really shouldn't have mixed business with, personal. And so that's kind of there's a catch-22 in there somewhere.
So for this book, it worked out really well. And we went back to her, of course, for the second book, and she started and she got concepts together, and then she unfortunately fell ill and was not able to continue.
Oh.
And that's when we ran into some trouble.
I bet.
And we went through two or three illustrators before, no one to even get credit on the book, basically. But 2 or 3 illustrators to bring the concept to life. And it was a simpler concept. I mean, it's, it's a lot of sitting around and eating pizza.
But they're so cute.
And it's fun. This is probably the most fun.
Oh, yeah. He's
dreaming about pizza. That was an experience, because I don't know if you've ever used like Fiverr or any of those platforms. Have you had a lot of success or not at all?
I used Fiverr twice, and after that, I said, I'm done here, because there's just not a good way to test who you're about to work with. It is such a struggle. I do like Reedsy is a fantastic, because they do a lot of screening. They require a lot of the people who apply to be referred through their website. But Fiverr and sites like that, you have to be so careful, because even if they're cheap, there's probably a good reason for it. Not everybody, but you have to do your due diligence on that.
Yes, absolutely. So we tried Fiverr, and we went through 2 illustrators, and then we had somebody finally just come in and like iron it all out, because it was very rough.
Yeah.
These were people who said that they had done illustrations for books, but it was a little rough,
Yes.
That took longer. That took about 5 months.
And it's so it's frustrating, and you should go into any kind of, and we're going to talk about self-publishing in a minute, because it is a process. It does take time. You can't rush it. But at the same time, especially when you've had one good experience where you're like, oh, that wasn't so bad. And the second time around, you're going, wait a second, shouldn't it be easier this time? Yeah.
It was harder. It was definitely harder. We had lucked out with the first person, and it just was not as easy the second time. And we were trying to get the book done. So we were trying to get it done before my son went to summer camp. He's a sleepaway kid. And we did not manage to do that. So he's at sleepaway camp, and he was he a waiter, or he was either a waiter or a counselor that year? But either way, he was either managing meals or children. And I'm sending him pictures saying, I need this proof. This is what we got. What do you want changed? And he did a lot of the managing of that part of the process, which was great. Especially on the second book. He learned a lot and took over. And we needed it done. We were invited to something really phenomenal called the Chappaqua Children's Book Festival in Westchester, New York. I don't know if you know anything about that.
Don't.
So it's an annual festival that's been going on for 10 years. And I think they had over 200 authors there last year. We were I think we were one of 2 self-published authors who were there. So that was great.
Yeah.
But they had the Magic Treehouse Woman. I think they had Pinkalicious at one point. They've had a lot of really fun people.
Yeah.
And you get quite a big crowd, but we needed the book done before that.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, isn't that the way it goes, though? Like you think, okay, I want it done by this time because of this. And that's exactly when you're going to hit those snags or the stall or whatever. And so you just have to kind of flex and roll. Like you just have to go with it and hope for the best. Which clearly there was a plan, because it worked out, I assume.
It worked out literally 2 weeks before we got the copies. I think there was a misprint on the first proof, so we had to go back and redo that. It's a process. It's definitely a process.
Oh, for sure. And so you did decide to go the self-publishing route. So was that always going to be your plan, or was that something that you decided, you know what, this is probably just the better choice of the two?
So I originally looked for an agent. And I spent a lot of time looking for an agent and connected with somebody for the first book. They loved the book. They loved the concept. And it sat there for a year, which was fine, because we had the year. But after the year was up, I had this kid who was now going to be a sophomore or it was in the middle of his sophomore year of high school. And I wanted this done in my spare time. I'm a college advisor. So I wanted to make sure that it was done before he started applying to colleges.
Yeah.
And before, as part of his story, because it really was part of his story. And it's what he did one of the things that he did during the pandemic. So we pulled the book from the agent. I have some regrets about it because I would have loved to see if it got picked up mainstream. But I also know that we did the right thing because of timing.
Oh, yeah. So what was that first foray into self-publishing like for you? Where did you start? Or were you just scrambling going, how do I do this? And
For
what
your
did that look
next
like?
guest, I have somebody who I'm going to refer you to.
Okay.
Is someone, her name is Marlene Fisher, and she is a blogger on Facebook. If you ever see a page called Thoughts from Aisle 4. She has been blogging for a long time and has a very large audience. And her son was supposed to get married in the middle, like July 4th weekend of the pandemic. Okay. He's been dating his now wife. He had been dating his now wife since they were in college. They were about 5 years out. They had this 300-person wedding planned. Sure, this is not an uncommon story. And they ended up with a beautiful little wedding in her backyard. And she wrote a book about it. And she self-published it. So she said to me when I said, I don't know what to do. I'm, sitting here waiting for this agent to get the book sold, and Jonathan's getting older by the minute. My baby is getting older by the minute.
Yes.
What do I do? And she said, I would just self-publish it. So I spoke to her and my business partner's daughter, and here's another book for you. This is a children's book. My business partner's daughter had self-published with another person. She collaborated on a children's book. She is a pediatric dentist, and she wrote a book called The Tooth Fairy's Busy Day, which is an adorable story. And she also self-published. So I sat on the phone with both of them, and they told me what I needed to know. And I took a little bit from each person, and that's how I figured it out, basically. And I was more in charge of that process than the 14-year-old, 15-year-old.
And that's fair because, his responsibility, I guess, would have been school at that point. So, working through that. But I think that there's a lot to be said for collaborating on the business side, and not even just collaborating, but like networking when it comes to self-publishing, like figuring out things it's complicated. And I wish that I had been more open to seeking out the help that I needed for the first book. I think I would have been more confident if I had, but I didn't know, which is why I even started the podcast in the first place, was because there were too many things I didn't know, and which also meant there were other people who didn't know. And so I started the podcast so I could say, hey, these are things that you need to consider and things that I didn't consider, and let's learn together as we go, because self-publishing is its own monster and it's constantly changing. Did you find that from book 1 to book 2, even though they were close together, how much things changed in the process?
I didn't think that the Amazon process changed. I thought that what's the other platform that a lot of bookstores?
Ingram Spark.
That process changed.
It did.
And that I had to relearn. So that I found hard. How long is your first book?
About 110,000 words.
Oh, wow.
It's a novel. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a novel.
Definitely, yeah. And that's not even my longest one, but it was where I started. And so yeah, no, it's a doozy.
How many years ago did you start?
That one published in 2022. I finished writing it in 2021. It was kind of like we were coming off the pandemic, and my brain had been quiet for a long time, and so it was almost like it hit a hard reset, which was lovely. Like, honestly, there were so many good things that came from those couple of years, between 2020 and 2022 that, yeah, I don't want to go back and do it again, but I am thankful for the opportunities that I had because I woke up one morning after having had a dream and I thought, I wonder how that dream ends. And I just started writing. And then the next thing you know, I had enough to like fill several chapters and then it just kept going. And I was like, I think I'm going to write a book. And my husband's like, you go, honey. And I did, it's like, it was great. And it just kind of flowed and the creativity was there and it just kind of sparked something. So, but yeah, Amazon hasn't changed too much. They have changed some of their, like their metadata stuff, like their categories and stuff that you fall into and their ad process. And so there's a lot of stuff that I'm still learning, 3 years into the process.
How are you? And I've had this hurdle to overcome. We've marketed our book pretty much on the ground.
Yeah.
Versus online. We do an Instagram page, but we've really been, foot soldiers with it.
Mm-hmm.
From going to libraries to going to schools. How are you marketing your book? Because you wrote a novel, so you don't have that nursery school audience.
Yeah, it's true. And you can also market to parents and that kind of thing. And so that's nice to kind of have that target audience to say, hey, I know exactly who I'm marketing to. And see, I did this thing where my first 2 novels are in the Christian fiction genre, but then my next series is just contemporary romance. And so they're separate genres. And so now I have 2 target audiences that I'm trying to market to. But I will say the best platforms that I have used have been the blog tours. And I don't know how that would work with children's books necessarily, but some of my favorite things have been that there are publicity companies or blog tour companies really that they have all of these readers who love reading and they have blogs still or social media platforms that they will read and review the book. Some of them do author interviews to kind of share, and there's a giveaway that the author is responsible for in the end, whether it's a copy of the book or whatever. But those have not only been really good for sales and those kinds of things and exposure, but like building my platform and my community has also been super impacted by that because they're sharing on my Facebook page and I'm sharing their stuff. And so we're creating this even bigger community. So, which I think is huge for those of us who are trying to reach people who are like-minded when it comes to our books, because romance readers come in all varieties. And it's really hard to be like, this book is for you because I'm a varied romance reader. I will read on just about every level of romance, but there are some who are pretty avid that they will only read certain kinds. And so it's a balance trying to market quite like that.
Right. And you really have to find your niche.
Yes, exactly. And I don't know how to do that. Right. Like I read all the time these books that are like, you find the person that you were writing for specifically. I'm like, well, I wrote it for me. So does that mean I'm writing to a 40-year-old woman who has a kid who, yes, but I also read all kinds of things. So I can't really say that I am a target. I don't know.
Right. It's very hard.
It is.
Are you an avid reader?
I am. Like I will, yes. Like over Mother's Day weekend, because I was not required to do anything I didn't want to do, I put away 3 books. Like I just boom, just reading, in 2 days. And so
but I can pick up a book, but I have to finish it right away. I have to go through it. But I'll read anything.
Yeah.
As long as it's well written.
Yes. That's my only requirement.
The style has to appeal to me. My mother always gave me Edith Wharton books, Ethan Frome, and The House of Mirth, and I could never. They were torture. These are the most charming, romantic stories you'll ever find. They were torture. To this day, she talks about how Johnny Tremaine was one of her favorite stories, and how my boys should read it, and I just start laughing.
And that leads to not every person is your ideal reader. I mean, that is case in point, that we can all pick up the same exact book and leave not only taking something away from it completely different from one another, but some of us may not even finish it because we can't. Yeah. No, I get that completely.
Yeah.
And marketing is probably one of the hardest parts of self-publishing.
Yes.
But one of the things that I've also really loved learning about, which we are experimenting with for my next book that comes out in October, is an ARC team, the Advanced Reading Copy team, and they're also my street team. And so I have a dozen ladies who are pumped after reading the first book, and they're like, we're ready for the second book. And I'm like, tell you what, we're going to partner up. You get the book early before everybody else, and then you go tell everybody about it, and they'll tell everybody about it. And so utilizing your network and your community and stuff like that, I don't think you can find a better marketing team than that.
Do you have beta readers?
I do have beta readers. They're crucial to developmental stuff, like find my plot holes and that kind of thing. Actually, I've just drafted my email that goes out to my beta reader team on the 1st. I just drafted that today. I was like, it's so close. Like June 1st is so close, and it will go out to beta readers then. And they've got a month to read it and to help me find holes in the plot. I tell you, they're not for grammar and punctuation and spelling errors. Like they're just helping me write a better story. So, which I love. I love they're willing to do that because they also get free books in the end. So
and then they pass them along to everyone.
Yeah, exactly. So, but yeah, and I think again, utilize people who love books like yours.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be your best course of action.
Right. And have you stayed within those two genres, or are you looking to expand, or?
Right now I am staying in those two genres because the first two books I'm working on like a 1.5 that kind of fits between them because they're a series. And the book that came out in February, the one that's coming out in October, and then I have two more. They're all part of the same series.
Wow.
They just kind of happened. Like they just kind of popped into my head and I wrote them. And then there's ideas for a spinoff series from that series. So we'll see right now. But I do have a work in progress that it's an urban fantasy that my dad really wants me to finish because that's his genre. So we'll see. Maybe for Father's Day, I'll write him a book. That's funny.
That would be really nice.
It would be really nice. I love him, but I don't think I can write a book in that short amount of time.
Right.
So there was something else I wanted to talk to you about. You have an educational consulting company that you're part of?
So I do. I run a company called Game Changer Tutoring Connection. I'm the co-owner. I have a business partner, Marilyn Rifkin. We've been doing this for over a decade. And we are like tutoring matchmakers. So that's really what we are. We are here to connect kids to tutors from preschool through post-college career prep. So we literally do everything from teaching your kid to read to middle school writing, math, calculus, test prep, SAT and ACT test prep, college guidance, interview prep, resume prep, and then after that, we have career counselors. We also have people who do executive functioning. So, if your kid is struggling with organizational skills or test-taking skills or anything like that, and we have people who guide you through college, get that one, who help you in college choosing your classes. When you're going to a gigantic school, University of Illinois, Indiana, any of these schools, it's hard to really get the full attention of your advisor. Mm-hmm. So we have people outside who are not your parents.
There it is.
Who are not your parents, who are going to guide you through, and then will help you get internships and and help you prepare for jobs. For your first job, you have to interview with a screen. Like you have a screen, and you're interviewing with the screen.
Wow.
How do you do that?
Yeah.
It's a one-way conversation. We have people who specialize in teaching you how to do that.
Nice.
So under that umbrella, I do college advising, and I work with kids from 9th grade through 12th grade, and I help them sort of figure out who they are and guide themselves. I help them choose clubs that might interest them, the point of my process is that you're painting a picture of who you are at this point in your life.
Yes.
And I am helping them do it without them and their parents fighting with each other.
That would have been so beneficial years ago when I was, working through that, because you have no idea. I know you like to think you know who you are when you are in high school, but I promise you, and you're going to hear my words. If you are in high school, you will hear my words and you'll go, no, oh, she doesn't know what she's talking about. But I do. I promise you, the person you are in high school is not the person you will be even when you're halfway through college or who you will be 5 years after that. So to have somebody say, let me help you find what you're good at. Find your passions. Find those things that will take you far without the frustration, because I was so frustrated. It took me 10 years to finish an undergraduate degree
Oh, wow.
because I was so frustrated and didn't know what I could do with the talents and abilities that I did have, because I had all these voices. You should do this, you should do that, you should do this. And it was never, hey, you're good at this and this path will get you there.
What did you set out to do?
What did I set out to do? I set out to be a teacher,
Oh,
which
okay.
I did eventually teach. But my degree was in marriage and family counseling and psychology. Like, I have an undergrad in psychology, and I was going to do secondary education, which I did teach high school AP psychology for a few years. And but I was also a marriage and family counselor, which I was good at, and it's fine. But if somebody had told me 15 years ago, you're allowed to write books and be creative and make money doing it, holy cow, would my life have looked so different at this point. Yeah.
I have an interesting path to where I got as well, because I went to law school after I graduated college. I am the worst lawyer. I would never, do not hire me as a lawyer. But during law school, I started editing college essays as a way to make money.
Yeah.
And I went into, after practicing law for a short period of time, I went into marketing and I did a lot of writing there. And I did financial marketing. I did creative marketing. That was fun. That was really fun. Throughout that time, as I was editing college essays, I'd write for newspapers and magazines and whatever I could, get published in. That was really fun. So I have, a portfolio of places that I've done articles for. And then one day I was sitting around with my now business partner, and we set up a class for our two kids who were really good friends growing up. And people kept coming up to us saying, hey, can we get into that class? And we were like, we're not running the class. We just signed our kids up, man. Like, we're not, we're not the president of the class. We're just having our kids play baseball. So she turned to me and she goes, there's a business in this. Mm-hmm. And that's how we started our business.
Awesome. I think that's great. I think that kids need to hear, and there are alternatives to going to college. And if you can find that trade that you're good at, whether it's HVAC or welding or whatever, like, there are so many paths to success, and it's not just a straight line from point A to point B. Like, there are so many options and opportunities. I wish somebody had told me that. I do. And so I'm so glad that you're there.
Everyone has their path. Mm-hmm. And I work with kids who start out saying, I really want to go to college. I'd say about 96% of the kids I work with end up in college, but there's that 4%. And I've said to parents, I think that your child would be better off taking a gap year, considering doing something more, hands-on creative.
Yeah.
And I think that there's so much value in that.
Yes. Yes.
There's just as much value in doing that as there is in sitting in a classroom for another 4 years.
Absolutely. And a lot of times it's more economical if you will take that breather, that gap year. I mean, I was 17 when I moved off to college. 17. Come on. There was nothing about that was a good idea, but it's what was expected.
That's what everybody does.
Yep, exactly. And so, I mean, good gracious, like I wasn't even old enough to vote, like, much less make
Well,
common
it's
sense
not
decisions.
right.
I mean, geez Louise. So, no, I love that. I think that's a fantastic concept of just, being there to help guide kids, because they are kids. They are not small adults. They are kids.
Right.
Figure out and help them figure out what comes next. Because who knows, there might be the next great author or artist or whatever, who doesn't need to go spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to find that out. Like
It,
guessing.
one good idea is all it
That's all
takes.
it takes. That's it.
My husband, his law school, his roommate during law school, who did not go to law school with him, but was somebody he knew from college. He had a really good idea, and he dropped out of college, and he was a great success because of this one really good idea.
Yep. That's all it takes is one good idea. So we've kind of already flipped the script. You've asked questions. I've asked questions. Do you have more questions that you want to ask and take over the show for a few minutes?
I'd love to know how you went from the Christian genre to romance. I think that's fascinating because that's quite,
Well, I have always been a romantic like that. I mean, from the time I was little, it's always been like roses and sunshine and flowers. Like romance has always been a huge deal. I don't know why. I've just always been drawn to it, I guess. So when I wrote my first book, it was and is. I mean, obviously, it's a Christian romantic suspense, and so there's romance all through it. It's and the second one follows up with those characters, but they're married at that point, and so it's a different kind of romance, and it just shows a different stage of life and that kind of thing. The series that I'm currently working on, it's a wholesome, as Amazon calls it, a wholesome contemporary romance. And so all doors are closed when things happen. Like you know that there's passion and love and that kind of thing, but the doors are closed. We're not going to intrude on those private moments. But it just takes the spirituality aspect out. Like it's just not a specifically religious book. Like there's no, in the first two books, you see specific references to God, to prayer, to those kinds of things. Whereas the second book, it's just a happy love story. And so to say that I really did a big jump, it wasn't a huge jump. It's just two different genres is all.
Have you ever wanted it to become like a Hallmark Channel movie?
Yes. I'm not even gonna lie. So the first book, I actually reached out to Karen Kingsbury. She's one of the big Christian authors, and she has her own production company. And they were like, "Thank you, but at this time, she's only focusing on turning her own books into movies." I was like, "That's fine, but just know it's an option. It's here if you want it." So yeah, I have absolutely would have loved for that to happen. And it still could. Hallmark, however, specifically, they're very specific about what they will accept. Even in their books that they publish, there can be like you can't have an on-the-page death. There can be like minimal physical touch between characters. Like they're very particular, and so I don't know if I want to write that stringently because people die. It happens. Just saying.
It's happiness.
I mean, there's happy endings. I only ever believe in a happily ever after or a happy for now. Like your ending is going to be satisfactory. You may cry getting there, but you will leave going, okay, I can accept that.
And isn't that the way life should be also?
It's real life. Absolutely. Yeah, that's how I feel about it. And there are so many aspects when it comes to turning a book into a TV show or a movie. I had no idea. Like writing a screenplay and that kind of thing, that is not for me. Just so you know, that's a very different ballgame.
Written a screenplay.
I have not. Like I tried. I did. I was like, because I had a screenwriter approach me and say, your first book would make a fantastic script. And I was like, yes, it would. You want to write it? And he was like, yeah, but it's going to cost. And I was like, that was an investment I'm not ready to make right now. Like, because I know that it's his time, his energy, and that kind of thing. And I'm like, I'm not to that point. Maybe one day. So my husband was like, why don't you do it yourself? And I was like, sure. How hard can it be?
Have you ever taken any writing classes? Or is it just something that you've done on
It
your own?
is something. I've just always been a natural word person. Like I've just always been a writer. I won multiple contests growing up in speech writing and speech giving and that kind of thing. And so I've always I used to blog when blogs were super popular. Like I blogged about just life in general. And so writing has never. It's just been natural. But there are different apparently styles and formats of writing that. Oh, and grad school, the research papers you write nonstop. So yeah, I guess like yeah, it's a different kind of writing. There's just a bunch of different styles of writing, and screenplay
Yeah.
writing is not for me.
Right. If you can write, then you can write about anything.
I agree. I agree.
If you can't write, don't bother trying.
And you know what? If writing makes you happy, by all means put words on a page,
Right.
but also invest in a very good editor if you think you're going to want to publish said writing.
That too.
Yeah.
That too. But I think, and I'm sure maybe you felt this way also, but I'm sure you spent many years in English classes. And it's really the whim of the teacher as to whether they like your writing style or not.
True, yes.
And
Yes.
writing is not an objective art form. No art forms are really objective. They're
That's
all
true.
subjective. But it's not like math where you either get the problem right or you don't.
Right.
So the right teacher can either encourage or discourage or motivate. I've had teachers, and I'm sure you have also, where they've motivated me to want to be better than I was, either to show them that I could do it. I was editing college essays and I had a legal writing teacher who did not like my writing style.
Isn't that funny?
I was like, I'm helping kids get into college. What are you talking about? Um, so I got better at it.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Well, and again, that goes to, knowing who you're writing for, and who you're writing to. That can also make a difference. Because, the letter that I'm going to write to my husband is very different from the letter that I'm going to write to my best friend. Like those are two totally different letters, two different styles. The way you communicate is just different. And so it does matter who's reading it. My 10th grade English teacher, Miss Brown, God love her, and she's still going, she's still teaching English, but she was the hardest teacher I've ever had. And up to this day, probably is the hardest teacher I've ever had because she was so particular. I mean, even walking into her classroom, your shirt had to be tucked in. Guys weren't allowed to wear jewelry. This wasn't dress code. This was her classroom. We were a very serious classroom. And she took her work and our work that seriously as well. But she was always, she was complimentary, but corrective. There was always going to be hand in hand. Both of those things were going to happen. And it was because of her that, the day that I made a perfect score on one of her papers was the day I knew I had arrived. I was like, we're done here. I can do nothing better in life right now. That was it. Thankfully, I did get a little better from 10th grade writing. My level has, slowly escalated. But, at that point, I thought, man, this is it. This is all I got.
I saved a lot of my old notebooks from high school with my writing, so I've seen the progress that I've made.
Aren't we grateful? Aren't we
the regression that I've made? It depends on the way.
Well, and you know what's funny? My first book, I thought it was a good book, and everyone that I know personally who read it, they're it's so good, it's so good. And then I wrote the second book. Now, a couple of things changed. One, I had experience in writing a book. So, I got better. Two, I had a different editor. And that also made a huge difference. And so I can see a drastic change, which is funny. Other people might not see it as much as I do, but I know it's there. There's a drastic change from book one to book two. And then just the ability to push out a book from my brain to the page when it came to the third time I wrote a book, that's a totally different process as well. It's faster. I can do it more efficiently. And so I think I can use my words better. And I'm still using the better editor. No offense. My first editor was great. My second editor has been, she gets me. She gets my work. And she just makes my work better. And so, yeah, you should see improvements. Every book, you should see improvements.
Where did you find your editor?
So the first one I found her on Reedsy, 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 and she's fantastic. She worked for one of the big five, not the big five. She worked for one of the, it's a subsidiary. She's working for Thomas Nelson? No, Zondervan. She worked for Zondervan, which is a Christian publishing company. And so she had 20 years of experience working for a Christian publishing company. She wrote her own Christian fiction books. And so we just worked well together like that. You know, it was a good process. It was a good learning process because she provided so much insight into the whole writing process and getting the book out there and what was next and developing structure and that kind of thing. The current editor I have now, she was born 21 months after I was to the same woman and man who birthed me, and so she's my sister. And and it's funny because I was hesitant. I was so hesitant. I was like, is this something? Because she's a genius. Like words, she's better with words than I am. Like as far as she doesn't have the same kind of imagination, but she has the particular, like she can line edit like nobody's business, which makes me mad sometimes. But that's a different story. But I was hesitant at first because I was like, that's somebody I know really well that I have to work very closely with and trust her with my work. And now we're working through our third book together, editing, and like I can't see me going a different direction until she tells me otherwise.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's better than having your sibling do it.
I mean,
when I worked at the Bank of New York doing financial marketing for a while, and I loved that job, and I loved my boss. She was just the best, Paula Kaprowski. She's listening, and she knows I loved her. And we used to have a process called the proofing room. So we'd have proofing committee meetings, and for whatever we were writing, and it was so much fun. It was really fun, and we were, we'd sit there, and it was and actually the women with whom I worked, some of them are still very close friends of mine. But it was really fun to see everybody's perspective on your writing and your perspective on their writing. And I love that, like getting down and dirty into the editing of things.
It's stressful because, in my opinion, every word I put on the page was like, it was part of me. And so when she's like, hey, you have to take these words out, or there are far too many words on the page. And she's like, we've got to cut it down some. I'm like, that hurts. Why are you being so mean to me?
Don't give me your college essay then, because
listen, I get it though, because when the first draft of the book that came out in February, I mean, it was 130,000 words, and that's a lot of words in a book. But you're talking, it spans 30 years of these people's lives. And so I was just like, I got to know all the details because I fall in love with my characters and I need to know what's going on with them. She's like, but not everybody needs that. Not everybody that reads your book needs to know every single detail. If you need to, that's fine. And I was like, but I don't want to take them out. And she's like, well, then put them in a document for yourself to go back and read later. Okay. So we cut like 10,000 words, and I was just like, we made it. It was
every single one of them.
These are my deleted scenes. Nobody touched them. They are locked files. Oh my gosh. But I love working with her, and I love the process because we are enough alike that she can take my work. It still sounds like my work, and we're still going to make progress to make it the best work we possibly can.
That's really great.
Oh, it is. All right. So, Deborah, tell the listeners how they can connect with you. Like, where can they find your books, where they can find your tutoring company, all of that good stuff.
Awesome. Thank you. So my books are available on Amazon, or ask for them at a local bookstore. I love a good indie bookstore.
Yes.
So it's Deborah Notis and Jonathan Notis. We're the authors. And then my company is called Game Changer Tutoring Connection, and it's gamechangertutoring.com, one word.
Okay.
And, we're here to help any of your listeners. We can help. And I really enjoyed this. Thank you.
I did too. Now, we do have one last question. It's the big question that it's the only way off the show. So it's kind of like, this is how you get off the island. All right. So are you ready for your big question?
I'm ready.
All right. What is one piece of advice or encouragement you want listeners to walk away with if they hear nothing else?
Reach out for help.
Yes.
And reach out for individualized help.
Yes.
You don't always have to be part of a group. Work on your strengths and weaknesses and let other people help you. You have a support network. That support network exists.
Oh my gosh. And that is so applicable to writing a book, to figuring out your future, and everything in between. Like that, yes, there are people who know more than you, and you should seek them out. Yes. No, I love that. Deborah, thank you so much for being here and hanging out. This was a fun conversation.
It's really fun. I'll be happy to come back.